everyone. Welcome to the Law Firm Reboot podcast. My name is Nick Werker. Now, during this podcast, we'll be featuring recordings of panels that took place live at Answering Legal's 2024 Law Firm Summer Reboot Camp. Before we dive into that recording, I wanted to briefly let you know a little bit about the camp's host, Answering Legal. For those not already familiar, Answering Legal is a 24/7 virtual receptionist service that exclusively works with the legal industry. Whenever lawyers can't get to the phone, our highly trained receptionist team is there to make sure they never miss the new client. Answering Legal now even integrates with your favorite legal softwares and provides a free mobile app. As a thank you for checking out our podcast, we're giving you a special free trial offer of Answering Legal, which includes an additional $300 off of services. To take advantage of this offer, visit answeringlegal.com, book a discovery call with our team, and just let us know you watched our Reboot podcast. Please note that this is a limited time offer. Now, without further ado, let's get to our panel. Let's get into it. First panel of the day. Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Answering Legal's 2024 Law Firm Summer Reboot Camp. My name is Nick Werker. I'm still this guy. I'm the marketing director here at Answering Legal, and I will be your host for all of today's panels. And I am going to be very tired at the end, so if you see me drinking coffee or you see me drinking too much coffee, mind your business, please. For those who may not know, this camp provides law firm leaders with expert advice on how to reinvent their practice for the second half of 2024 and beyond. Today's portion of camp will be focused on legal marketing related topics, and to start things off, we've assembled a panel of expert legal marketing agency heads, and they are all going to shake their heads and be like, oh no, I'm not an expert. No, they are. To help identify some of the problems your current marketing campaigns might be experiencing, joining me for this conversation is Andrew Nasrinpay, Conrad Saam, Tsakalakis, and Seth Price. Guys, thank you all so much for being here. Before we dive into the questions, I want to let everybody get to know our panel a little bit. So panelists, can you introduce yourself and tell us about the places that you work, own, operate, manage, whatever it is? I'll start with you, Conrad.
Yeah, so I've been doing this since 2006. I was recruited into what was then a little-known startup and is now a little-known afterthought. But for a flash in the pan, Avo was the hottest thing in digital legal. And I just was really lucky. In 2006, nobody except for Tim Stanley at Justia knew what SEO was, and I got to learn SEO with the venture capitalist who backed Avo. And I kind of parlayed that into Mockingbird. We now do a lot more than SEO, but that's my history, short history. Don't hate me for the Avo thing. It was awesome while it lasted.
What about you, Seth?
So, I was a lawyer by training, and I remember back in the day, I started my own firm, and I remember Conrad, you're the CEO from Avo. Mark comes to DC, the DC bar, and he's presenting, and the audience is going after him. You can't do this. We can't put lawyers online. It was crazy. That was not that long ago that there was pushback within the sort of legal community about the idea that we were going to have lawyers putting their services out there. So I built my own firm using digital and met people like Conrad and Guy and later Andrew along that journey. And about 10 years ago, spun out our in-house digital to what's today Blue Shark that services about 250 law firms nationwide. And thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Excited to have everybody here, but thanks for being here. What about you, Guy? I know, Guy, you remind me of Jared. You got your hand in so many like honeypots.
Ha! Well, my hand's in some kind of pots. I don't know if it's always honey, but I'm like Seth in that I'm one of these lawyers turned marketing agency founders. And, I was a young lawyer. I was like, what should we be doing at the firm? Talked to lawyers. A lot of lawyers said, well, people don't use the internet to hire lawyers like us. I was like, agree to disagree. Founded Attorney Sync. Then I founded another agency, and then I do a lot of speculative legal tech investing.
How's that worked?
Which part?
The speculative legal investing.
I think it's going great, honestly.
Right.
I'm feeling really good about it.
I'm going to visit Guy on his island. He's going to send a jet for me.
It's going to be a very small island, Seth.
What about you, Andrew?
All right. So I've been doing marketing for about a decade now. Prior to getting into legal, I was in the e-com vertical. So I was at the ticketing startup where I was the first marketing hire. And at my time, Bobby was the first engineering hire. We scaled that to about 30 people before we had an exit. And then from there, we actually got recruited to be leadership in-house at Morgan & Morgan. So we kind of got to go into the belly of the beast, where I was the director of paid digital there. Bobby was the director of engineering. We were there for about 3.5 years, kind of figuring out how the whole legal landscape works. Got to spend what felt like monopoly money looking back at it now, kind of seeing what works for what case types, finding out what the acquisition costs are across different channels, doing a lot of tests where you have both branded approach and non-branded approach to acquiring cases. And then after that, we spun up our own agency, which is MeanPug. We're a boutique agency that's got about 20 employees, and we really focus on close relationships with a small group of clients. So at any given time, we have about 40 to 50 clients where we're really focused on growth and developing strong brands with those clients.
Awesome. So before we hash out like the helpful tips or, get into trying to help people, I want to give our panelists a moment to vent. What is one thing, panelists, that frustrates you and just drives you crazy as a marketing mistake that you see growing law firms or just law firms in general making when they're trying to, market their firms?
I mean,
Anybody?
intake, I'll start. I mean, intake is the bane of every, law firm's existence on the B2C side. And it has, if anything, I think gotten more and more complicated. I mean, everybody here can vent about how the different softwares and technologies that we have to integrate, it's not just about building a website and sending traffic, but what's being tracked and what is being answered. And I see it as from two different sides. I run Price Bennett's 45 lawyer firm, and we have great intake until there's somebody's off their game. You have systems as best you can in place, but we take our clients where they're at. They're not all sophisticated. And I'd say that the biggest challenge that we've been facing over the last few quarters is making sure that when the phone rings or the forms are filled out, that people are getting on them and monetizing them, because otherwise they look at us and say, we're not getting ROI. So if I'm venting, that's my vent.
I would agree with Seth that poor intake is number one. But even beyond that, inaction. Most firms are solos and they do no marketing and kind of expect a stable supply of referrals to come in. Another would be undercapitalized campaigns. So because we're a full service agency, we do everything from like building websites all the way up to running TV ads, radio ads, billboards, all that sort of stuff. And a lot of people want to do everything. And by doing that, they end up undercapitalizing areas that need a lot more money if you're going to play in it. And then I guess the fourth area I would say is like for client communication. So the most common example of this is just not taking advantage of every communication with clients on the reputation management side. So obviously reviews play a huge role in like local SEO and help on the paid ad side, even for things like LSA. So I'd say firms are typically pretty bad at handling that as well.
I think what I see often is looking backwards and looking sideways. The backwards is, it used to be like this. Can you come back? Like I want my LSAs to work like that. Like a year ago, our ROI was X. Well, like we need to get back to that. This is shifting sands, right? And if you're trying to go back to where it was, it's not going. That doesn't happen. And the other part when I say talking about looking sideways is there's so much of this where you look at another firm that's doing this, or you look at a different firm that's doing that, and I want to emulate that. And you're like, your market is completely different. Your assets are completely different. Like this is not the game that you should be playing. There's so much looking back and looking sideways instead of looking forward. Like where can we go? What is the next thing? What can we be unique at instead of worrying about what everyone else is doing? I think that is it takes your eye off the real ball. Guy and I make fun of this all the time. You go to conferences and you see people who've built their TikTok that and it works for them. Oh, we should do TikTok, or they're killing it in local or whatever it might be. They're winning that because of their unique assets and strategy and effort, as opposed to where you currently are, right? And I think that is a common mistake.
Yeah, mine's kind of a little bit of all of those. It's just lack of business acumen. we'll say something like, hey, let's talk about your budget or target cost per client, or, what's your goal for this year in terms of growth and fees or whatever the business metric is. And, a lot of lawyers, and I'm sympathetic to it because, I don't teach business in law school. I don't know. I don't know what do you think it should be? And then it will turn into, and some of them you'll get, I want to dominate my market, and you'll say, well, what's your budget? And this goes to Andrew's point about undercapitalization. Like, I can spend about $500 a month. And so, like, those misalignments between expectations and reality and what things cost, that's the thing that's the most frustrating to me, because, even we do our best to try to guide someone down a path, and we'll say, look, let's actually set up a forecast and talk about what you might be able to accomplish this year. If you don't have the foundational language to talk about it, it just goes over their head. And so, another classic example is like, I need clients tomorrow, and I want to invest in a long-term SEO campaign, or I need clients tomorrow, and I want to do demand generation, like long-term brand building. And it's just like, if you're not even, you're speaking a different language, right? It's like trying to do math problems where the answers don't add up to what they're supposed to be. So that's my event.
I'll give one silver lining to the discussion, which I think is, and I agree with, all these points. We live in the same fishbowl, but that as paid has gotten harder and harder. Lead gen has become almost impossible for many markets, third-party lead gen. The PPC is becoming prohibitive in a lot of markets, and LSAs are competitive to get. That all of a sudden, what used to be, I'm paying X amount per month for my SEO, and that's locked in for the length of my stay. Could be 10 years, could be more. I'm never going to pay a dime more. I think that the more sophisticated clients are starting to get that a case is worth so much, and some of the education that's gone on, so that there is an appetite for investing in a way that I think before was, I'm paying X amount, maybe $5,000 a month, and people are now saying, well, if I'm paying $4,000 a case in the market, and I can get 4 or more cases, that a larger spend is justified. And I think that that's been a positive through, it's not good for firms because it's got more competitive to get cases, but from an organic SEO point of view, I've at least seen a willingness to invest more to get more.
So before law firms can go about improving their marketing approach, they need to establish what needs improving. I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. So their desires kind of misalign with what they actually need. So what advice would you give for owners of law firms on evaluating their current marketing efforts and like where they need to be?
Where do you want to go?
Where do I want to go?
Not you. That's what I would ask them, right? Like, what are you trying to do over the next 12 months? What's success look like for you? Because everything's going to flow from that. You can be any firm, and you can be like, I want to grow 10,000% this year. Okay, great. That's going to cost a lot of money, right? That's to me the whole point is that if you can't start with like what's a reasonable success, picture of success, or a reasonable, like, this is where we're going to go over the next time period, you can't, everything else is going to be random acts of marketing, and you're going to be, it's like going to the craps table. You can throw some stuff out there and see what works. And that, and I think some of your budget probably should go to that, testing and experimentation. But if you don't have a destination, how do you know where you're going?
Yeah, I would kind of build on that and say there are like 2 very common approaches on the marketing side. One is branded campaigns, and the other is non-branded, where most lawyers will say they want to be long-term thinking and they want to build their brand and they want to invest in that. But at the same time, most can't do that. They need the cases today because it might take them 18 months to resolve and get paid from. So there's definitely a misalignment on the duration with which to view the campaign ROI. So I think the biggest thing is looking very, very clearly at if your campaigns are going to be branded campaigns or direct response campaigns or some sort of mix of the two, and understanding the timelines of those investments. And I think that is probably the primary source of failure in communication between both agencies and law firms.
So on my side, I'm going to get super tactical on this. I think this is a competitive evaluation as well as the where you're trying to go. And I think most firms miss the notion, like this is a zero-sum game, people. And so you need to understand the competitive. I just jotted down a couple of things that I think are super salient on this. Number one, your location. Are you located where in a place, your office or offices, located in a place where there's high population and no competition? That's an asset, right? If you're and that means that is one of the channels that you can play. Number two, your reviews, right? Whether real or spammy, I'm not suggesting you should spam your reviews, but your reviews relative to competition, very, very relevant. Number three, from an organic perspective, what does your backlink profile look like relative to your competition, right? And going just through the DR score is probably insufficient to do that. I would look at your existing local, organic, and local traffic, right? So, and by local, I mean like serving your market. If you get 10,000 visits from Uzbekistan, who cares, right? So I think that is an asset. You're like, this is something I can build on or not. And then finally, we talked about this earlier. What's your budget? Like, how much of today's profit are you willing to put into tomorrow's growth, right? And all of those things fall into a competitive set where you can either work to the dominate the market part, or you never will.
And I'll just, look, I think Conrad gave a very salient sort of fundamental, what is the checklist that you're looking at? And I'll try to talk about the same concept, but from a bigger picture. I love the book and then movie Moneyball, if you're a baseball fan, and looking about, are you putting your assets in places? If you're in downtown Atlanta and you're trying to play the PI game, it's pretty brutal. And there are people there spending a lot of money and have been spending a lot of money for a long time. But the state of Georgia is pretty large, and even the greater Atlanta area is pretty large. And post proximity update, there are opportunities that are out there, and making sure that you're being smart because you have limited assets. And yes, you should be judging everything that Conrad said as far as link portfolio and review counts and all those things. But if you're going to then take what work has been done, making sure that you're using that those assets are being placed and that you are collaborating with your digital arm to make sure that you are getting the most value you can from the work being done, and not just closing your eyes and saying, I'm going to be downtown Atlanta, but rather saying, you know what, I may sit there, but I'm going to make sure I get offices in the suburbs where there's less competition and I can actually make a buck.
Well, it's funny that you use Atlanta as a comment. I had a conversation with a law firm, successful law firm in the suburbs of Atlanta, growing law firm, doing great, we're winning, we're killing it on local. Let's open up where there's a bigger population center in downtown Atlanta, right? This is the dumbest thing you could possibly do because they're not considering the zero-sum game competitive set of what's going on. They were never going to win in downtown Atlanta and kill in the suburbs, but they would get destroyed if they moved into the city.
And right, in one lease in Atlanta that you could have 3 suburban offices. Review count comes in, and that's the other piece, which a bunch of you guys have talked about, which is, in the new normal, if you don't have an ability to generate reviews, it's good. No matter what the agencies are doing behind, it's going to be very hard in the local search game.
So I want to ask, because one problem that law firms might be having with their marketing is that, say they have, I don't know, a ton of ads and videos that they've created, and this is all kind of hypothetical based on like not having the right agency either, but they aren't being seen by the right people. What advice can you give for law firms on having ads actually reach their target audience?
Well, 2 steps. First, you got to be where your target audience is, right? Then and this is, to Andrew's point, this is one thing we see all the time with like this brand stuff. People, brand campaigns will say, "Oh, just saturate the market, get everybody everywhere." Well, that is a strategy, but you're not going to, if you think about it, the one that comes up all the time is like, I want high net worth divorces, right? So I don't want to do $500 divorces. I want high net worth individual divorces. Well, guess what? Saturation marketing is not going to help you target that segment of the market. And so how do people that are high net worth individuals who are thinking about divorce, where are they, and how are they asking questions? And that's step one, is being where they're looking. And then step two to me is like you've got to have some kind of position that resonates. Like this is to me, this is one of the other failures. Like I don't think any of us mentioned this as one of the biggest failures, but like marketing is about standing out. And I guess Conrad kind of mentioned it in terms of the copycat thing, but if you don't have a message that's going to resonate with your segment of the market, like doesn't matter how much I mean, you can hit them over the head with an ad or an impression every day of the week, but if it doesn't stand out, it's not memorable, and there's not something message wise there that they can gravitate towards. And Conrad will talk about affinity. It's not going to matter, right? It's just going to keep showing them the same boring gavel and American flag and leather-bound books, and no one's going to care.
Well, it's interesting because Andrew's background is fascinating in this because, right, you were in the belly of the beast, as you said. You saw somebody who invested in brand at the 100th degree, right? Like as much as anybody we've seen in the history of legal. And I feel like because things have gotten much more competitive and the TV players have started, they used to ignore digital. When Conrad and I myself started out, there were TV players and they made so much money from TV, they just didn't care. There was a major TV agency that literally had the same title tag on every page of the site. It was crazy. And one of the things that I think was there was like, hey, if you just showing up was enough. And I think now the issue is when you show up, if you're just showing up and don't have any brand behind you, then you'll get some percentage of the clicks, but you're competing against people that are showing up and have leveraged brand. And that makes it that much more difficult, to Guy's point, that if you are just saying, hey, I'm a gavel and I'm listed in the 3-pack, that's great. And you got to be in it to win it. But that you're then competing against other people where somebody in the back of their mind has seen that brand before. And that combined with being there is going to be a pretty significant advantage and disadvantage if you don't have it.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything here, where I think the industry is consolidating in a lot of the case types where the money is going. And what we're describing here for the smaller firms, for things that work, it seems like everyone's talking about less competitive locations, because that's the only way these firms are winning, because they don't have a differentiation. If you don't have a strong brand with differentiation, it kind of doesn't matter if you are hitting the right people with the video, because so are the people that have a strong brand. So, I mean, everybody jokes about how like the marketing lawyers are standing on top of an 18-wheeler with a hammer and jumping off, or lions in the background, or a catchy jingle. But
wait, that's my client, man.
Yep. Ultimately, you have to be that because that's what you're competing with. So you can't be I'm a trusted lawyer. That's table stakes. If you're a lawyer, everyone's supposed to already trust you. You really need a strong, differentiated brand. And when I'm talking about like mass media, it's for case types that it makes sense for something like personal injury, because everyone could potentially be a client. There are some demographic profiles that work better, but for the case types that have a smaller audience, let's say like a rare condition like cerebral palsy, like a med mal case that has 3,000 people a year getting it, mass marketing doesn't make sense for it. And that's where digital makes a lot more sense. That's where using third-party data and audiences with the DSP make a ton of sense. So to kind of answer the question directly of seeing the right people. So if it's a case type that has a small audience, that's a very well-defined audience, it's going to be setting up more complicated campaigns where you're bringing in third-party data from data brokers, or you're actually applying those layers of targeting so the right people are seeing it. But I think I agree with everyone here where the messaging and the branded components most firms put together are not fit to compete in today's market. You need to get an agency that can really help you develop your brand, because you should have a reason for differentiation.
And I think we're all piling on with the same concept. To me, I want the concept of differentiation is important. I would change the way you think about this from brand awareness to brand affinity. And that is the ultimate differentiation. I like you. I don't even know what you do as a lawyer, but I like you. What are the things that so yeah, you can. There's differentiation in many different ways, but why why can I build affinity for a specific audience? I don't care what that affinity is. You support women, you support local businesses, you support it doesn't matter. It's the I have you resonate with me and I like you. And so I love people to think beyond differentiation and towards like, how do I build affinity beyond awareness? Because like I use this example. I know Pepsi. I'm never going to drink a Pepsi, right? It's never going to happen. So how do you build the affinity?
It's interesting as you say this. In a way, you get two bites at the apple, right? Or maybe there's more, right? I talked before about like, hey, you're just showing up as part of it, and there is a brand or an affinity. But even within that, I would separate it out because there's a bigger overarching brand, and then there's the person. And look, even looking on this call, there are people that will call up and say, hey, I need digital help. Conrad is going to solve my problem, or Seth or Guy or Andrew, versus there's a firm brand that's bigger than that person. I think that one of the things is knowing what assets you have and dancing with it. And if you don't have the budget for an overarching brand, making sure that you're, at least digitally, when there's a connection, there's a person that's going to solve that person's problem. And I think that is one of those sort of bigger picture questions that firms should tackle, because to go with a brand when it's not known can be, very humbling or unsuccessful. But that if really you don't have that, knowing that the person out there, you're going to lose to people that have brands, but that if you have, hey, I'm the person who's going to get you the most money for your case, that connection can be made, and is probably the way that smaller firms should go.
I'm going to move on to another topic and this one has hit me very recently, so I'm curious what you guys have to say about this, because I would say things tend to change pretty quickly in online marketing, and it can be easy for lawyers to fall behind. But what's one recent online marketing development that you think attorneys need to be aware of?
You know what I'm going to say, Guy.
I do. That's why I was keeping my mouth shut.
I was waiting for you to, Guy. So I think the biggest thing and I don't think people really understand the extent to which this is so absolutely horrendous, the way Google is deliberately conflating. We talking about brand, right? We can go straight into the brand conversation. Deliberately conflating brand with top funnel keywords, right? And that has happened in pay-per-click, and it has happened in LSAs, and it is absolutely disgusting and gross. And the Google recommendations to automate a lot of this is based around generating more revenue. So what do I mean by that? People who are searching for divorce lawyer Cincinnati are also now bidding on those branded terms, and they are deliberately conflating a top-end keyword with the branded terms. And when you do that, you get more people into the market. And when you get more people into a bidding market, the price for everyone goes up. And it's gross, and it's happening deliberately. And it's happened with LSAs. So it's worse. In pay-per-click, you can actually segment these things out, and a good agency will segment them out and show you different data as much as possible. In LSAs, they don't give you any data, so you have no clue. And they're going out of their way to confuse and obfuscate what you're actually buying. So we've got this, and I've shared this with Guy. I'll share this with you guys right now. Back in 2016, we were paying on average $1 per click for branded keywords. And that was turning into a lead, phone call, form fill, text, or chat, at a cost of just under $5. That same campaign right now, we're paying over $12 a keyword, and it's costing $92 for phone call, form fill, text, or chat. And those are converting into consultations at less than half the rate, which means that there's confusion by the person who's actually doing the query and the click in terms of what they're actually getting. It goes against everything Google has said. They're making so much money by getting you guys to waste money on your own brand, and it's gross. And it's in pay-per-click, and it's in LSAs, and it's
Well, I think the LSA piece,
exploded.
it's basically there. I mean, look, you've talked about it, but it's so frustrating. I mean, look, it was a gift. It did very well for a while, especially for PI lawyers. And all of a sudden, I feel like I was expecting to go to bidding and see the numbers go up, but instead they're just using hamburger helper, it feels like, in order to make greater funds from the same amount. I mean, what you're talking about is it's nonsense, but between that and the elimination of, so what are people sort of be focused on? LSAs have changed or are about to change significantly. If they get rid of all disputes and you end up in a situation where everything is AI driven, they're claiming it's going to mean more cases. I think it's the same number of cases. It's just going to cost you more and drive your intake further batty.
And probably will, but here's my pushback. As long as it makes economic sense, keep spending the money. You're not gonna, you can take it to Congress, I guess, if you want to try to change Google. But look, if your cost per client still works, go spend that money. I was going to zoom out a little bit. I think there's there always is, but there seems to be more of a shift in consumer behavior and sentiment about digital and platforms and how people go about looking for lawyers. And, whether you talk about dark social, you talk about, it's not, in the past, direct response marketers well, I won't put everybody in this boat, but me, performance direct response marketers, we're very linear funnel, last click, we can finally answer Wanamaker's riddle. We can tell you exactly how your money's spending. And then look, that's still a thing. Don't get me wrong. There's still search, click, hire. That happens. But I think the legal services consumer journey is getting much more messy. Attribution, I think, is that's the thing that I'm on right now is like, and I don't say, people that are listening to this that have been following what we've been talking about for a while, I don't, you keep your quantitative attribution. It works hand in hand, right? But if you're not asking people, how did you hear about us? Or like Conrad's, who should I thank for sending us to us as part of a required field in your intake or in your forms, you're missing the boat and you're going to end up optimizing yourself into a box. Conrad's other favorite word, ROI, it's very easy to optimize to ROI. Just reduce the denominator, right? You can just stop spending money. But can you drive volume to support your practice doing that? I don't know. And so anyway, so that was ranty. I'm going down a rant. But I would say make sure you're thinking about your attribution models and, asking folks, how did they hear about you? Because you're going to be surprised that your quantity, and you should hold your agencies accountable for this too, but your agency is going to report, hey, we got 100 leads from PPC, and then you're going to open up your CRM, and it's going to be like 50% of those people are said, I found you because I watched your Facebook, whatever, or I got referred to you by somebody, or I listened to your podcast, whatever it is. And that's not showing up in attribution.
I have a follow-up question to that. What do you think about the halo effect of all of the advertising working in tandem like that? And then I know it does mess up attribution on a one-to-one basis, but what would you say about that?
I'll kind of address pretty much everything everyone has said. Is that if you have a brand, you're going to win. Right now, everybody's mad at Google, but it's because you have no way of differentiating. You're paying the Google tax. We all know that number is going to go up every year, whether it's on branded traffic or on non-branded traffic. It's going to go up because they need to make more money every year. To me, the answer to all of these is really simple. You have to build a brand to be differentiated. And to give a more concrete example, you don't have to spend the same level of money as the big advertisers in your market and do traditional TV. You could do over the top. You could do it on just retargeting on people that looked at blog posts that relate to whiplash or some certain level of injury where you could win on SEO and you're not competing with a large firm on the same type of term. So there are in every channel affordable areas where you can improve your brand and retain clients. I think the theme here, though, is that most firms don't want to pay the price to differentiate. So the agencies have the hard job of winning where location is the differentiation, where you can win on local SEO in a non-major market. And it's just making your agency's job hard. So agencies really just need to push their clients to develop their brand is the high level answer to most of this.
Yeah, and I would totally support that. And two quick follow-ups. The one problem is that a lot of these agencies, they don't have any experience building brands, so they're selling what they sell, right? So it's like the lawyer comes to them, is like, I need marketing. It's like, all right, local SEO, that's what we do, right? And then the other thing that you made me think about there with the brand thing it's ironic that the person who told us that brand sorts out the cesspool is the guy who monetized ads at Google. Eric Schmidt said this forever ago, and I think it's finally coming to fruition. I think people for a long time were some people got it, but kind of shrugged at it. But that brand is the answer.
But I throw this back to the panel here, which is you get somebody who's there with limited budget, right? You're trying to figure out, you can't, if you don't come up in search at all, you don't have a shot. So you take your budget, can you spend enough to make a difference? Because right now you're hearing a lot of, I should be on billboards, I should do this, I should do that. And in one sense, I think I'm following what some of the bigger advertisers in the markets are doing, which is we have our TV budget, but they're almost at the point where they're not looking at that for any direct cost per case. It's almost like that's a cost they're putting out there, and now they're basically going to have to play the digital game, whether organic or paid. And that all of the offline brand building that Andrew and Guy just talked about almost becomes a second factor, which may determine the level of success. But if you're sitting there as a single lawyer in a mid-sized firm, it's a pretty big concept to wrap your head around. The bigger firms have been advertising like crazy for years, and they're like, okay, we have a brand, but the best, how do you slice this up so that you're still going to get found organically or through paid? And how much do you put towards brand, given that it's not going to attribute to direct cases per se?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. But it comes down to the fact that you have to start somewhere. So you could put a line in the sand and say 10%, 20%, 30% of my budget is going to go directly towards the long term of SEO and brand. Things that have a longer investment time horizon than throwing it into LSAs or PPC or things that are direct response and you get the cases today. Albeit the cost per case is going to go up, and everyone knows that. So you know that the strategy is flawed to put it in the short-term solution, but people aren't willing to because they need to pay the staff and the rent and all that sort of stuff today. So I think the simple answer is, you have to do it. You might as well start today. You can definitely do something in brand, knowing that there's always going to be a bigger fish out there, and being authentic and figuring out a form of differentiation requires no budget different than someone else. You just have to be creative. So you got to use your brain.
And I get that, Andrew, but let me throw this back to you. So you get some guys like, should I get a billboard? I get this question a lot. And the question is, in theory, that's brand building, and it's not bad. The question is just like with SEO, if you don't spend enough, you don't get over that hump to be found. Is there a number where if you're not going to spend that on brand, you shouldn't go in that direction? There are other things you can do. You could do some social, you could do some other things with it. But the idea that a single, bus billboard or standing,
it's not enough. It'll do.
Yeah.
And that becomes sort of that middle ground that's really tough to give advice in.
But I would distinguish, billboard is a tool for brand, but it's only one. As Andrew was mentioning, there's lots of free ways to build brand. And so, but yeah, I'm with you on, the thing we get all the time too, we get the same thing. And I think is what you're alluding to is like, they're thinking about billboards like it's direct response, right? They're like, oh, I'm going to put a billboard up and put a call tracking number on it. And I'm like, no, don't even bother. You think people are driving down the road trying to memorize your phone number? Now, look, plenty of firms we know, they do branded phone numbers on their billboard, but that's not direct response. That's just brand building in a different way. And so anyway, I guess I'm distinguishing like billboards is one type of way to build brand, but gosh, I'll tell you what, social media, a lot cheaper way to build brand. And you can have a lot more quote unquote billboards on social media, spend a lot less money, have your brand be much more effective. And, especially when you talk about paid and then you throw in what happens when you actually like differentiate yourself. That's where it starts to take off, because now you've got flywheel effect where people are actually like, oh, they want to actually like engage with what you're putting online. They share it with other people, networking effect. Like that's where I'd be thinking. But yeah, just to your point, Seth, like, yeah, one billboard, forget about it. And the good news is all that money you were going to spend on that one billboard, now there's many different ways for you to invest that more efficiently.
Yep. And to kind of build on that, Seth, you're going to get better pricing the more you buy. I'm sure we all know this. And the longer duration you negotiate the contracts. So the best part about traditional media, where I feel like there was like a decade where traditional media performed really well, was very easy to attribute, and everyone said, like, this is the future. And the people that invested in traditional are actually coming away a lot better because they get to negotiate. The more they buy, the better their pricing, as opposed to Google. The more you spend, a lot of times you get reverse unit economics. And Google is also raising that price every year as more competition comes in and starts bidding. So totally agree. There is a line where if you can't spend a certain threshold in a certain market, don't do it because you're burning money. But to a certain extent, you have to get into it. So like Guy was saying, you can build up to that. And a lot of those ways where you build up are digital. But there's just a ton of ways you can do marketing. And you just need to think in every type of marketing I'm doing, even the non-branded stuff, how can I benefit from this with my brand? That is a question you need to ask in everything. Otherwise, what you're doing is not going to work long term, and you're like constantly running to try to reinvent.
So we're talking a lot about
Nick, before you wrap it up, which is one of the things that I don't like that I see is using brand as the nomenclature for a non-successful marketing campaign. So like very often it's like, oh, it's branding. Well, at the end of the day, we're running a business, whether you're the digital business or whether you're the law firm business. As a law firm business, brand, you could burn a ton of cash on brand and it's great. But if you don't have cases to justify it, then how are you supposed to pay your people? And so I think that that's the slippery slope. And again, agree with Andrew that brand is important, but I think that it can be used positively, but it also can be used to sort of cover up non-successful marketing efforts.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
So I was just going to ask what the best ways to build brand is for people that are listening. We're talking a lot about brand and how valuable it can be, or how you can use it to sort of blame bad advertising campaigns on, but what are the best ways that you guys have found to help lawyers build their brands?
Do you mean define best?
Best, okay, maybe not best.
Most effective.
Retained clients.
Most cost effective.
And I'm gonna dodge your question and ask and pose a different answer to a slightly modified question. This issue, it goes to more about how do you hold your brand campaigns accountable for something? How do you measure brand? And there's all sorts of leading indicators, right? You can talk about organic search impression growth on brand queries. You can, and to Andrew's point, ultimately, I would be like, yeah, you should be asking the question, how'd you hear about us? Oh, I see your stupid TV commercials every day, right? There you go. There's your accountability on brand, right? And so to me, that's more of the issue. And I totally agree that agencies obfuscate on brand. We've all experienced that. We've all seen the agencies taking credit for brand when they really were just trying to do non-brand direct response and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, there's a lot. The reason I dodged the question, Nick, too, is because there's a million different ways to build brand. A million different ways to do it. At the root, though, to me, it's the ones that stand out. So it's like, and the other thing too that we haven't talked about that I think is important, and this goes to like choosing channels and mediums and messaging stuff, like your branding better be something that you can get behind and that you like, because we see a lot of we get lawyers all the time, they're like, I want to do the TikTok thing, and I'm like, all right, here's what's working on TikTok. Well, I would never do that. Well, there you go. That's very easy. You don't have that. That's not going to be your vehicle for doing this anyway. So I think there's a certain amount of like your own identity and what you want your firm to be about that you've got to think about in terms of the messaging you're putting out there, where you're putting the messaging out, how you're putting it out. And, look, a suit and tie, sitting on a suit and tie on TikTok and talking about like recent legislative changes in no fault, like, yeah, look, there's probably some audience for that, but like, you're not building a viral brand talking about stuff that nobody wants to consume. End of rant.
Yeah, I could directly answer, Nick, a few things that I would do. I mean, to start, your website. Like most people, we're talking about differentiation. If you look at most attorney websites, they all look very similar and they give no reason for differentiation. So let's start at the easy things that everyone can afford. It's website. Another example would be social media, like organic social media. And then when you see success or you have something that you think is going to be successful, put money behind it, run paid versions of it. You could do over-the-top TV where you could target very specific areas and do that very affordably. All of your creative assets, so your video content, your social content, things that you give to clients, the way you handle clients, the things you do with clients when they're a current client to get reviews, all these things on the process side, most firms just don't do it, and they don't put emphasis behind it. And a lot of these, I feel like there is a little bit of bleed between like internal firm operations, which, with all honesty, most agencies don't even get involved with. But I think we're at a point where you kind of have to, where you have to be able to share that data back and forth. If you're not creating like a bi-directional sync of intake status with your agency, or a bi-directional sync of like reviews and reputation management, there's no way you're going to be able to compete even on like the quote unquote more simple run-of-the-mill stuff like SEO and PPC.
I think you were asking effectiveness, and we've talked about differentiation a lot. He also mentioned from a brand something you can get behind. I've used the word affinity. I think what you need to think through, especially in a larger market, and this is a huge mistake lawyers think, is who do I want to appeal to? But that also is the trade-off of I'm okay not having this type of client, right? I'm okay not working with whatever it might be. It doesn't matter, right? And I think law firms are so concerned about disenfranchising a portion of the market. The branding that you can do that is going to resonate the most stands for something. It's behind something. It means something. We've talked about going beyond just the lawyer and awareness, but you have to be willing to not try and boil that brand ocean. Now, there are some ways in which let me use an example of an attorney that Guy and I know fairly well. A female-run law firm in the Midwest pushing locally run businesses that are driven by women. Right? That is, it works with something that she can get behind. It works with something that people have affinity for. And if you're a sexist piece of crap, you're not going to hire her anyway. Right? And so that's okay. That's okay. Lean into, and it doesn't have to be gender. There's all sorts of things that you can lean into. You're going to be walking away from some of the market, but one of the easiest ways to build affinity is to stand for something. And that doesn't mean that everyone is going to love that. And that's okay. That the easiest way to build affinity is to be for something that people like. Let me use Guy and I as a really dumb example. We could be all about Michigan. We may disenfranchise every single person who lives in Cleveland. And that's totally okay if we get a whole bunch of business out of Ann Arbor and Detroit, right? Like, that's not the way we work. But like that kind of silly, I stand for something and therefore I'm going to disenfranchise another group is the way to make brand from an effectiveness perspective. You just have to accept that trade-off.
And here's the irony. You know what? People will contact me and be like, hey, will you still work with me even though I'm an Ohio State fan? The point is that they know me. They know that about me, and so they're thinking about me.
But, but to be fair, that's a little bit different. I mean, I know that you Michigan, Ohio State people take it, but like there are things that you can do that, you know, look, we've seen people lose political elections by talking about farmers in a non-positive way. You know, there are things you can do that, you know, look, you dance with what you got, right? There are people that may be part of a minority community, so you play that. You're not in it, so you're going to say, hey, we're not part of that group. We are the lawyers that are going to represent you in a different. There are different ways to slice it, but I don't think, look, and that's Conrad, you and I have had playful discussions over the years that there are consequences when you do play that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But like, I think about this when we think about the pool of lawyers in a market. And all of them are going out of their way to brand themselves as I have a JD, right? And as soon as you are the person who is the person who loves Ohio State, or like someone who's interested in climate change or supporting local businesses, or I want to help people rescue dogs, right? That's a big thing that's going on in the legal marketing world right now, is like, we're going to help you adopt a dog. As soon, like, and everyone loves dogs, right? Most people love dogs. If you turn off the people who hate dogs, like, okay, that's fine, because but what you do is you're like, oh, this is the lawyer who, I'll use a ridiculous example of the dogs. This is the lawyer who likes to help rescue dogs. Great. That resonates with me, or it doesn't. And now it's that guy versus 19 other lawyers who have a JD and a white tie.
That's a good, safe one. The number of people that are not going to come to you because you're rescuing dogs is limited. There are things that. But even if mathematically you piss off 80% of the market,
you
should be still lucky to get 20%.
And you get the other 20%, and the 80% hates you, but you get the other 20%, and everyone else is fighting over that 80%, and there's 40 lawyers fighting over that 80%, you win, right? Like, it's simplistic.
We're seeing some guys with giant checks doing things that are very non-lawyerly, and it may upset people. May upset a lot of people. But they may take some percentage of the market. I mean, it proves Conrad's point that if you can niche down and don't care about everybody else, you'll do well.
And Texas Lawhawk's a great example of someone that we all think is gross and disgusting from a positioning perspective. But boy, oh boy, does it work for his market, right? Like, game on.
Andrew will tell you there are some people that don't like John Morgan's advertising. Guess what? John's not losing his sleep over it.
Right. Bigger, because what is it? Size matters, right? I know that turns off a good portion of the market, including some people who worked at Morgan & Morgan, right? And so, like, but it's memorable and it resonates.
And we're talking about it.
Yeah, the funny part is, too, you can also create sub-brands for the people that you're alienating from that market. And the easiest examples there are different languages. So you can go after the Spanish-speaking market as one. Same thing along like political lines, race, like any of these demographics. The large firms oftentimes have sub-brands that go after those particular groups with a different type of marketing because they know their main brand won't hit that group. So I think that there's a lot of ways you could do it, but picking one and having like an honest, like authentic brand towards it is very important.
And that's the thing too, and maybe it's a slight variation on this theme, but gosh, there's a lot of name the type of lawyer in most major markets. And guess what? This goes back to the point earlier, and lawyers hate this. Legal services consumers are shopping. They're shopping around, and who they like oftentimes goes to the decision. I mean, how many times have you talked to a lawyer and the conversation is, I did the intake. They're talking to 5 other firms, all good firms. They went with me because of this thing, whatever that is. Maybe it's better service. Maybe they just liked it. Maybe you shared a similar story. Maybe you both like the same college football team. Who knows? But that's the thing that people miss is that if you try to go the generic route, you're going to lose because there's no reason for them to decide to pick you over anybody else.
Yeah, I'll kind of build on that where there's something like $4 or $5 billion a year spent on legal advertising, and go to any major market where a lot of that money is spent. Half of people cannot name a single firm or a single lawyer. So even with all this money going into legal, even the best players in the space, in a lot of ways, aren't doing a great job at being memorable and being differentiated. So I think there's still a lot of work to do there.
And Andrew, that gives hope to these smaller players I was referencing before, because while there are some people that are going to know a couple of brands, there really isn't that much market saturation. You still have a fighting chance, even if you don't have some great brand at the moment.
It's still incredibly fragmented as like a category. And I don't think you could do the same thing about any other area that's kind of consolidated. Ask people about toothpaste or insurance, and they can name at least a couple of brands for you.
I hate to do this, guys, but we're coming up on time. So my final question is, if our campers want to continue following your work and connect with your company further, where do you recommend they go? And I'm going to call on people, so I feel like a kindergarten teacher, but I'm calling on Conrad.
Well, the good thing for me is from a pure SEO perspective, I have an unusual name. So does Guy. Mine's easier to spell. So if you can't find me with Google, I'm not doing my job.
Love that. What about you, Seth?
So I'm on the older side, so I'm a Facebook person. You can Google me as well. There's a famous artist with my name in New York, but feel free to reach out and hopefully continue the conversation offline.
Awesome. What about you, Guy?
So I'm going to go. You can do searches for me. That's great. But I'm going to suggest that people subscribe to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. That's the podcast that Conrad and I co-host, and we have a lot of fun. And we love hearing from you. So if you got questions or you got some ideas, we want to hear from you. And thanks for having me, Nick.
I love Lunch Hour, so that's a shameless plug from me.
Thanks, friend.
What about you, Andrew?
I would say go to our website. I'm going to lean into brand here. We feel like we really differentiate there. So go to meanpug.com. And to kind of lean into brand more, you can email us at bark@meanpug.com, and we'd be happy to have a conversation.
I do
You know
love
Tim Stanley from Just E is a big Pug fan too, right?
I did not.
He's
He's
bonkers.
a
about
whole
Pugs.
Facebook thing for it.
Yeah.
We're more of a coddle organization at Blue Shark.
But I'm sorry, guys. That is all the time we have for this discussion. I'd like to thank Andrew Nasrinpay, Conrad Saam, Guy Tsakalakis, and Seth Price for joining me today.